My husband left me for another woman. He took my own family to their wedding abroad. He texted me. Don't be home when we get back. Once it's old. It's dead to me. They all returned and saw what I had done. Their smiles vanished. They looked at the empty land and asked each other one terrified question. I just watched from my car and smiled. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. The photo wouldn't load at first. The rain on the glass of my car distorted the 5G signal just enough to make the little circle spin. But when it finally popped onto the screen, the resolution was perfect. Too perfect. It was a carousel. Swipe 1, Brandon and Isabella kissing under a floral arch in Lake Como. Swipe 2, my mother, Susan, holding a glass of Prosecco, laughing at something Brandon was saying. Swipe 3, my sister Jessica, hugging Isabella like they were long-lost soulmates. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I just zoomed in. I studied my mother's face. She looked relieved. For years, she and Jessica had been running a quiet, effective, whisper campaign against me. It was never a shout. It was always a murmur. You're so lucky Brandon tolerates your long hours, Catherine, my mother would say while I wrote the check for her condo fees. Most men wouldn't put up with a wife who cares more about dirt than dinner parties, Jessica would add, while driving the Range Rover I leased for her. They had conditioned me to believe that I was the difficult one, the broken one, the one who needed to overcompensate financially just to be worthy of love. They had gaslit me into funding my own erasure. Psychologists call it the boiling frog syndrome. If you drop a frog in boiling water, it jumps out. But if you put it in tepid water and slowly raise the heat, it will sit there and boil to death because it doesn't perceive the danger until it's too late to move. Brandon hadn't started by cheating. He started by eroding my boundaries. A comment here about my lack of vision, a joke there about my obsession with sustainability. He turned up the heat degree by degree. He spent my money to build his image. And my family applauded him for it because he was charming. And I was just the wallet. They were all in the pot with me, but they were feeding off the heat while I was being cooked alive. I looked up from the phone to the house. It sat on the cliff edge like a jagged splinter of glass. $5.8 million of steel, concrete, and ego. Brandon called it his sanctuary. He demanded floor-to-ceiling windows because he wanted to live without barriers, which really meant he wanted the world to watch him exist. I paid for the foundation. I paid for the architect. I paid for the Italian marble floors he insisted were essential for his personal brand. He loved that house. He defined himself by it. It was the only tangible proof that he was the success he claimed to be. If I sold it, I'd just be liquidating an asset. I'd be giving him a story to tell the bitter ex-wife who took the house. He'd spin it. He'd victimize himself. And eventually, he'd find a way to come back, to leverage the memory of this place. But you can't leverage a void. I didn't want the money. I have plenty. I wanted to take the one thing he couldn't spin. I wanted to take the ground beneath his feet. I started the engine. The rain was coming down harder now, washing the dust off the hood of my car. I wasn't going home to pack. I wasn't going to a hotel to cry. I was going to my office. The frog was out of the pot. And she was hungry. My lawyer's office was on the 42nd floor, high enough that the rain clouds looked like a gray floor beneath us. Elias didn't offer me coffee or sympathy. He knew me well enough to know I was there for business. I placed the deed on his mahogany desk. It was a single sheet of paper that represented $5.8 million of prime real estate. "Are you sure about this, Catherine?" Elias asked, tapping his pen against the document. "You could sell it. The market is hot. You walk away with millions in cash." "I don't want cash," I said, my voice steady. "I want certainty." Brandon had always assumed he owned the house. He picked the furniture, he hosted the parties, he walked around the property like a feudal lord surveying his domain. He never bothered to read the fine print of our prenup, and he certainly never checked the title of the estate. He assumed that because he owned me in his mind, at least he owned everything attached to me. He forgot that I was the one who signed the checks. I was the one who navigated the zoning laws. I was the holding company. He was just a liability I hadn't written off yet. "The conservation easement," I said, Draw it up. Elias nodded and started typing. A conservation easement is a legal tool usually reserved for farmers or philanthropists who want to protect nature from developers. It allows a landowner to voluntarily donate the development rights of a property to a land trust. In exchange, you get a massive tax deduction, but that's not why I was doing it. Once those rights are donated, they are gone, forever. The land is designated as a protected habitat. It means that once the existing structure Brandon's glass ego was removed, the land could never be built on again. No new mansions, no subdivisions, no guest houses. Just dirt, trees, and sky. It was the ultimate scorched earth policy, wrapped in environmental virtue. I watched the printer spit out the final contract. It was warm to the touch. You realize, Elias said, sliding the paper toward me, that this devalues the property to almost zero in terms of resale. You are essentially burning money. I'm not burning it, I corrected him, uncapping my pen. I'm investing it in pest control. I signed my name. The ink was black and permanent. With that signature, the cliffside estate ceased to be a piece of real estate. It became a bird sanctuary. Specifically, a sanctuary for the peregrine falcon, a bird that mates for life and kills its prey by dropping from the sky at 200 miles an hour. I handed the document back. File it immediately. Before the demolition permits close. Elias looked at me with a mixture of fear and respect. It's done. I walked out of the building, and into the rain. I felt lighter. Brandon thought he was coming home to a castle. He was coming home to a nature preserve. He thought he could sell the house, leverage the equity, use my hard work to fund his new life with Isabella. But you can't foreclose on a meadow. You can't evict a tree. I got into my car and checked the time. The demolition crew was scheduled for tomorrow morning. The paperwork was bulletproof. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was clear the debris. The crew I hired wasn't Westwood Demo. It was a company called Reclaim and Restore. They specialize in sustainable deconstruction. They don't smash, they salvage. They strip a building down to its bones, reclaiming the copper, the steel, the high-end glass, and donating it to low-income housing projects. It was fitting. Brandon had stripped me of my confidence, my finances, and my sense of self. Now, I was stripping his monument to feed the community. I stood on the edge of the property line, wearing my hard hat and high-vis vest. The foreman, a woman named Sarah with biceps the size of tree trunks, nodded at me. "Ready, boss? Take it down," I said. It wasn't violent. It was surgical. I watched as they carefully removed the massive glass panels that had cost me $40,000 each. I watched as they unscrewed the custom mahogany front door. Piece by piece, the house was being dismantled. It was like watching a time-lapse video in reverse. The walls vanished, the roof disappeared, the steel beams were lowered to the ground with gentle precision. By noon, the master suite was gone, the room where I'd found the second phone, the room where he'd packed his bags for Italy while I was at work, the room where I'd cried until I was dehydrated. Now, it was just open air. The wind from the sound rushed into the space, smelling of salt and pine. It felt like the land was taking a deep breath after being held underwater for years. Around 2 p.m. Sarah waved me over. They were pulling up the flooring in what Brandon called his vision room, a soundproof office where he supposedly developed his tech strategies, but mostly just played video games and day-traded crypto. "We found something," Sarah said, pointing to a square cut in the subfloor. It was a floor safe, high-end, biometric, buried deep. Brandon had never mentioned a safe. I knew the code immediately though. It was his birthday, 061286. Narcissists aren't creative with passwords. The door clicked open. Inside, I expected to find cash, or maybe more love letters to Isabella. Instead, I found a stack of legal documents. My hands shook as I pulled them out. They were sale agreements. Pre-sale agreements. Brandon had sold the house, not on the open market, but privately, to a shadow syndicate based in the Cayman Islands. The paperwork was dated 3 weeks ago. The price was $7.5 million, almost $2 million over market value. I read the terms. Possession date: October 15th. That was next week. I flipped to the correspondence attached. Emails printed out. From Brandon to VIP, Capital, Group. The deed is clean. My wife is out of the picture. I'll have the keys for you when I return from Europe. Just wire the funds to the crypto wallet provided. My stomach dropped, then hardened into a rock. He hadn't just left me. He hadn't just tried to forge a mortgage. He was running a Ponzi scheme. He was deep in debt, probably from his failed tech ventures, and he was using my house as the collateral to pay off dangerous people. He had promised them a house he didn't own, in exchange for untraceable crypto. He needed this house to exist. If he didn't hand over the keys next week, he wasn't just homeless. He was a dead man walking. I took a photo of every page. Then I handed the physical copies to Sarah. "Recycle these," I said. Along with the rest of the trash. I walked back to my car. The wind was picking up, the house was almost gone, and Brandon wasn't just coming home to an empty lot. He was coming home to a debt he couldn't pay, to people who wouldn't accept an apology. He thought he was the player. He didn't realize he was just another piece of debris. The convoy arrived precisely at 4 p.m. 3 black Escalades, shining like beetles in the afternoon sun. I watched from my car, parked just inside the tree line. Hidden by the shadows of the cedars, Brandon got out first. He was wearing a white linen suit and loafers, looking every inch the tech mogul he pretended to be. He stretched, shielding his eyes from the sun, and turned back to help Isabella out of the car. She was glowing, her hand resting possessively on his arm. Then came my family. Susan and Richard, my parents, stepped out looking flushed and happy. Jessica followed, laughing at something Isabella said. They looked like a royal family returning from a successful conquest. They were drunk, on victory, on the thrill of having won against the difficult, workaholic daughter who never appreciated them. "Wait until you see the view from the master bedroom," I heard Brandon say, his voice carrying over the quiet hum of the engines. "It's going to change your life, babe." They walked up the driveway, chatting animatedly. They turned the final corner, the one that used to reveal the dramatic, cantilevered glass facade of the house. And then they stopped. It wasn't a gradual realization. It was instant. The laughter cut off like a switch had been flipped. Brandon took 2 more steps, then froze. He blinked, looked around, then looked back at the empty space. He took off his sunglasses as if they were malfunctioning. "Where is it?" Isabella asked, her voice high and confused. "You said it was here. You said it was on the cliff." "It is here," Brandon stammered. He spun around, looking at the trees, the road, the sky. "It was right here. I swear. The pool was there, the deck." He trailed off. Because there was no pool, there was no deck, there was no glass. There was only a field of native wildflowers, lupine, yarrow, and fireweed swaying gently in the breeze. A few large, rough stones had been placed artistically near the edge of the cliff, and in the center, a grove of young cedar saplings had been planted. It was peaceful, it was beautiful, it was empty. My mother, Susan, walked forward, her heels sinking into the soft earth. "Brandon?" she asked, her voice trembling. Did you move?" "No!" Brandon shouted. He was starting to hyperventilate. He ran into the middle of the field, spinning in circles. "It was right here. Who did this? Where is my house?" Jessica pulled out her phone, frantically tapping the screen. "Google Maps says we're at the right address, but there's nothing here." "It's gone," Richard whispered. "The whole thing. It's just gone." They stood there, 7 people in expensive clothes, surrounded by luggage, staring at a patch of dirt. The silence was absolute, broken only by the cry of a hawk circling overhead. The smiles had vanished, the arrogance was gone. In its place was a pure, unadulterated terror. They looked at each other, and then they asked the question I had been waiting to hear. What did she do? I took a sip of my tea. It was still warm. I rolled down my window. "I redecorated," I said. Brandon saw me then. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man who had just realized the parachute he packed was actually a backpack full of rocks. He sprinted toward my car, his white linen suit getting splashed with mud. "Catherine!" he screamed. "What did you do? Where is it?" I rolled my window down further. "It's a bird sanctuary now, Brandon." I donated the development rights to the land trust. It's protected in perpetuity. You what? He grabbed the door handle, but it was locked. He was shaking. You can't do that. I sold it. I sold the house. You sold something you didn't own, I said, my voice calm, almost bored. I held up the conservation easement document against the glass. You see this? It means no one can ever build here again. Not you. Not me. And certainly not the people you owe $7.5 million to. Isabella had walked up behind him. She was listening intently. She wasn't looking at the empty lot anymore. She was looking at Brandon. She was looking at his panic. Brandon, she said, her voice sharp. What does she mean? Who do you owe money to? Shut up. Brandon snapped at her, not taking his eyes off me. Catherine, you have to undo this. You have to call them back. I can fix this. I can pay you back. Pay me back with what? I asked. The money you stole from me to buy her ring? Or the money you don't have because your tech empire is just a Ponzi scheme? Isabella's eyes widened. She pulled out her phone. I watched her scrolling, tapping furiously. She wasn't calling for help. She was checking accounts. She was checking titles. You lied, Isabella said. It wasn't a question. You told me you owned this outright. You told me your crypto wallet was locked for security. Not because it was empty. Babe, listen to me, Brandon started, turning to her. Don't call me babe, Isabella spat. She looked at me, then at the document in my hand. She did the math. She realized she was standing next to a dead man. She stepped forward. Here, she said, thrusting her phone through my open window. On the screen was a chain of emails. Emails I hadn't seen. Brandon communicating with offshore accounts. Brandon setting up shell companies in her name without her consent. He was going to frame me, Isabella said, her voice trembling with rage. He was going to use my family's connections to launder the money from the sale. She airdropped the files to my phone. I'm not going down for this. Brandon lunged for her phone, but she stepped back, her heels sinking into the mud, her face hard as stone. My father has lawyers who eat people like you for breakfast, Brandon. You're on your own. She turned and walked back to the limo, leaving him standing alone in the dirt. I looked at him. He was hyperventilating. He looked at the empty land, then at me. Please, he whispered. They'll kill me. I know, I said. That sounds like a structural problem. I turned my attention to the gallery. My mother, Susan, and my sister, Jessica, were standing near the luggage, looking like passengers who had just watched their cruise ship sink. They weren't looking at Brandon anymore. They were looking at me. Catherine! My mother started, her voice wavering between indignation and panic. You can't just leave us here. We have nowhere to go. I'm sure Brandon has a plan, I said, gesturing to the man currently hyperventilating in the mud. He's a visionary, remember? That's what you always told me. Jessica stepped forward. This isn't funny, Kat. You destroyed our family's asset. You ruined everything. I didn't ruin anything, I corrected her. I just balanced the books. I reached into the passenger seat and pulled out 2 manila envelopes. I held them out the window. Jessica took them automatically, her hands shaking. What are these? She asked. Eviction notices, I said. My mother gasped. Eviction? From the condos? But those are ours. They were never yours, I said, my voice cold and precise. They are owned by my holding company. I paid the mortgages. I paid the HOA fees. I paid for the upgrades you demanded while you were whispering to Brandon about how ungrateful I was. I looked my mother in the eye. I know about the payments, Mom. I know Brandon was funneling my money to you to keep you on his side. I know you helped him hide assets. Her face went pale. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. You chose the upgrade, I told them. You chose the flash over the foundation. Now you have 30 days to find a new place to live. I suggest you start looking. Rent in Seattle isn't cheap. You're your own flesh and blood, my mother whispered. You're a monster. No, I said. I'm a landlord. I rolled up the window. The glass created a barrier, muting their screams, turning them into silent, flailing ghosts. I put the car in drive. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. Brandon was standing alone in the center of the field. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his phone. It was ringing. I could see the screen lighting up. The investors. The sharks. The end. I didn't feel pity. I felt the specific, clean satisfaction of a job finished to code. As I drove down the winding road, leaving the cliffside behind, I thought about the first principle of landscape architecture. Creation through destruction. To build a healthy ecosystem, you often have to destroy what's already there. You have to rip out the invasive ivy that chokes the trees. You have to burn the dead underbrush to let the new seeds germinate. Destruction isn't always an act of violence. Sometimes, it's an act of love. An act of survival. I had been an invasive species in my own life, trying to grow in soil that was poisoned. I had tried to build a structure on a fault line. Now, the ground was clear. The toxins were gone. The land was returning to itself, wild and free. And so was I. I was alone on the road, the rain clearing up, the sun breaking through the clouds over the sound. I didn't have a husband, I didn't have a family, but I had my name, I had my mind, and for the first time in a decade, I had a blank blueprint. It was time to build something real.